Hello from Pretoria. Is everything all right? People talk, say things.
Hello?
Why didn't you tell me it was out of order? I suppose you think that's funny.
I'm not allowed out the front door.
Who says you weren't?
Them.
Who?
Them.
It was terrible out there. I could hear breathing.
We told you.
Are you worried about the man?
They hate us. That's the truth. They want to kill and torture every one of us. You can see it in their eyes.
Come now, Frederick. Do you dream about unholy things?
I really don't like what's going on here. There's something wrong, and that's a fact.
Wait. What did you dream last night? This manifestation of evil. You must be delivered from evil.
Robservations with Robert Burnett.
Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your collector friend, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, the never-to-be-defined, maybe never-to-be-defined, some people have come close, existential Mr. Rogers. That's right. It's me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm coming right from the Robservatory. I'm Robserving right here in the Robservatory, coming at you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode number 1024. So it is true. Today, April 14th, 2025, is my actual 10th anniversary of first appearing on YouTube as a film pundit. My first appearance on YouTube was on AMC Heroes, before it became Collider Heroes, AMC Heroes Episode 6. And it was not something I ever really thought about doing. 10 years ago, I was working on we hadn't been sued yet, on the Star Trek fan film project Axanar. We had released Prelude to Axanar in July of 2014. Very proud of it. And I'd taken over as director of that in 2015, and in April of 2015, I was going to direct a scene called the Vulcan scene. You can see all this on YouTube if you want to watch it. I was also editing a micro-budget science fiction film written and directed by Mike Hurst called Paradox, that starred Malik Yoba and Zoe Bell, Quentin Tarantino's Zoe Bell. And that was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun doing that. It was really fun to work on Mike's movie. It was really fun to work on that film with the producing team, and it was great. So that's what I was doing, and I got a phone call from my friend, the king of the sweaties, the late great John Schnepp, and John Schnepp called me up and asked me if I wanted to come on to this YouTube show, and he explained it was affiliated with AMC, the theater chain. And it was going to be it was a show. It was 5 episodes old. That was talking about comic book movies, since comic book movies had become such a force in cinema. By 2015, the MCU, of course, started in 2008. Now it's 2015. And he wanted me to come down. I said, well, what are we going to talk about? And he's like, well, we're going to talk about James Wan might direct an Aquaman movie. And I was like, that sounds cool. So I went into what later became the Collider Studios, the Schmodown Studios. Then it was the AMC Studios, fairly new. They had moved over from the AMC 16 in Burbank, and they moved into their own facility. And I came down there. There was a lot of people working there. People I didn't know. I kind of walked in, met John. There was people like Mark Ellis and Christian Harloff. And I walked into this set, which is pretty cool. So I was like, this is a cool set. It's lit up, everything. I thought we were just going to, sit on a couch and talk about comic book movies. I didn't know it was very slick. It was very professional. I was very impressed. There's graphics. There was a control room with someone else producing the show. And it was also the first day that I had met John Campea. I didn't know who John Campea was. And to be honest, at the time, I really only watched YouTube for movie trailers. 10 years ago, I wasn't watching YouTube at all. So the whole thing was new to me. And I would do the show, and it would go by very quickly, and then I would leave. I usually had to go edit, or I had to go back to the studio up in Valencia or something. So I didn't stick around. I really didn't get to know. There was all this activity happening, but I didn't know about Movie Talk. I didn't really know about any of the other shows that were on that network. I just did Heroes and left. And that's kind of how it went for the first couple of years. And sometimes, we expanded. We became Collider. Heroes got bigger and bigger and bigger. I started to pay more attention to YouTube. Our Star Trek fan film project got sued. I stopped working on Paradox. Worked on a few other things, tried to get some movies off the ground. Ended up starting working on Tango Shalom. A lot of stuff started happening. And, for 3.5 years, it was pretty great. And then John Schnepp, in a very tragic succession of events, he got sick and he passed away. He passed away in 2018, and it was very disconcerting. During that time, I got more and more involved with the other goings on at Collider. I got involved in the Schmodown, and I thought when it first started, it was very casual. Whatever you knew when you sat down is what you knew, and I could do pretty well. I was the first Inner Geek champion, but that was then people started taking it a lot more seriously than I did, and people got much better than me because they would study. Like I never studied for the Schmodown, but it was fun. And then if you know my whole story there, Christian Harloff talked to me about becoming a heel and creating the character of the captain, which I thought was hilarious. And then working with the whole Schmodown crew was a whole different thing, different bunch of people. But still, if I had any regrets about any of that time, it was I just kind of came and went. And as the captain, I think a lot of people thought that was me. When no, it was just that was a persona that Christian Harloff suggested I come up with. And it was easy for me to be loud and everything. Of course, I had a few hiccups that I could get into if anybody wants me to, but there were two, really. One was when John Schnepp passed. That was actually very, very painful for a number of reasons. First and foremost being that a friend of mine had died, and I had known John for, 15 years maybe. And it was a painful time. But again, a lot of that was because people really didn't know me. And then John Campea left Collider, and he started his own show. And then after John Schnepp died, I left Collider. I still was involved with the Schmodown, but I left Collider and started. John called me up and said, "Why don't we do a show together?" So I've been streaming kind of on and off, mostly on, with John since August of 2018. And then it was John Schnepp who first suggested that I start a channel. John Schnepp said, "You have a sunny disposition, and you have the gift of gab, so start your own channel." And I was like, I wasn't into it. I'm like, what would I do? What would I talk about? And then Elizabeth, my girlfriend, bought me a microphone. Not this mic. People have asked what happened to Frederick Douglass. I used to have Frederick Douglass on this mic. This is not the same mic. My Frederick Douglass mic died, but I had that for 6 years. And Elizabeth bought me the mic to start my own channel. So I really started the channel in earnest in the latter half of 2018. The first episode of Robservations I filmed, it was going to be a documentary show. I was going to take what I'd done on DVD and make sort of geek documentaries about geek, but then I realized it would take too long to do. And the first episode of Robservations I did took months. I mean, I went and shot footage in Seattle. It turned out great, but it was much easier just to sit in my old laundry room and turn on the mic and talk. And in my mind, what I wanted to do was I wanted to do a show that was like going to a science fiction convention. And each episode would be like going to listen to a panel discussion, although the panel would just be me. So, if anyone knows, I've been sick for like 2 weeks. I apologize. But I couldn't let this monumental date go by without doing a show. So I just started doing, Robservations. And came up with terms like, I never liked the idea of geeks and nerds. I thought that those terms immediately had it wasn't just condescending, it just wasn't right. It put everybody, that's why I came up with the term imagination connoisseurs. I was trying to come up with something a little pretentious, but fun at the same time. And I thought imagination connoisseurs, it makes you stop to think, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to be an imagination connoisseur? And I think it summed it right up. It summed everybody that I had certainly met working at Collider was an imagination connoisseur, and all the people that I had met in LA since I moved here in June of 1988 were imagination connoisseurs. And then I started watching a lot of YouTube. I started watching channels like Midnight's Edge. I discovered Gary Beekler, Nerdrotic, and I started watching the imagination connoisseurosphere, the film punditry sphere, and I started really getting into shows. I started watching shows, not just but I watch a lot of things. I watch all different kinds of shows. I liked automotive YouTube, even though I'm not at all into cars because I've never had enough money to be into them. But people like the Stradman. I still watch Supercar Blondie. I love watching. I guess it's wish fulfillment. Call it what you want. Wow, my streams are still getting choked off today. I don't know why that is. But YouTube became I started watching more YouTube than anything else. And then, of course, obviously, the YouTube film space was really, really interesting. And then, as my show was developing and I was seeing what was right and what was wrong, I started meeting the YouTubers that I was watching and started doing collaborations. People would invite me on their show. And I would go on anyone's show. It was so much fun. I felt like I was meeting, my tribe of people. Now, what's interesting is when I moved to LA in 1988, I have always considered myself a first generation imagination connoisseur in terms of the media space. Now, what does that mean? Well, there's always been fandom. Science fiction fandom has existed, but it was mostly literary based because there just wasn't that much great science fiction media. There wasn't a lot of great science fiction movies, and there certainly wasn't a lot of great science fiction movies that famous sci-fi authors and pundits would consider worthy of discussing. And they were all the same movies. Everyone knew what they were. In the 50s, it was Day the Earth Stood Still. It was Forbidden Planet. Maybe it was War of the Worlds, Destination Moon, When Worlds Collide. But there wasn't a lot. And they were considered more on the pulpy side. Then, of course, in the 60s, you had a few more things. But 2001 and Planet of the Apes and shows like Star Trek and The Twilight Zone, brought a respectability to the media. And it was interesting because Star Trek, The Twilight Zone, and Outer Limits brought in writers that had written novels and screenplays and had fought in World War II. And so there was a real respectability. When I was born, Star Trek was in its second season, the end of its second season. I was, believe it or not, born in 1967. And my real birthday is May 15th. So my real birthday is a month from today. So I hope everybody that wishes me a happy birthday will be there on May 15th. So the real thing that hit me, and I think what I would call the first generation of imagination connoisseurs of the media age, it was Star Wars. And to see Star Wars in a theater in May of 1977, or whenever you saw it, I was 10. It opened just after my 10th birthday. And I was already, the year before, I had seen Logan's Run and King Kong. The year before that, I'd seen Jaws. And there were all these incredible films coming out in the 70s, and I was a big film fan. I couldn't see a lot, but I started watching movies really religiously when I was a kid, when I was 5, and then 5 years later, so half my life ago, Star Wars came out. And it's hard to explain to people now what it was like to live in a world where Star Wars didn't exist. For us imagination connoisseurs, nobody cared about Logan's Run, and my friends would go see it, but nobody really thought about it. And I spent a long time thinking about these movies. And when I was 5, I started watching Star Trek. I've told the story about seeing Planet of the Apes for the first time, and I started reading books. I'd become a member of the science fiction book club by then. I wasn't really into comic books as much yet. I'd read them as a young kid, but I did like the media. I liked the Super Friends cartoons and all that. But the movie thing really took hold of me. And when Star Wars came out, there was a show about the making of Star Wars that I saw after that, and it really started to hit home that people made movies, and that's what made me want to get into the film business. And then after Star Wars, as we all know, the world was filled with what Fred Clark called cinefantastique. Science fiction, fantasy, and horror movies exploded. They were not a real viable... you'd have the occasional thing like The Exorcist that did well at the box office, but low-budget science fiction and horror, John Carpenter, Joe Dante, David Cronenberg, John Landis, all of Bob Clark making Black Christmas, all these people, Don Coscarelli doing Phantasm, Wes Craven, Sean Cunningham and Friday the 13th. There was this huge explosion of both low-budget horror and sci-fi and bigger-budget science fiction films that changed. Between Star Wars and Alien, 20th Century Fox became like the studio. They'd really changed the world. And then, of course, in the wake of Star Wars, Star Trek the Motion Picture, The Black Hole, Superman the movie came out in 1978. So the world changed. And so that was your first generation imagination connoisseur. And at the same time, you had the people, the film school generation was also making their movies. Spielberg never went to USC. They wouldn't let him in. I think he went to Long Beach. But you had all the USC people like George Lucas, like John Milius. That was kind of those first generation students, and John Carpenter, and all those people went to film school. And we became, as imagination connoisseurs, fans of all those people. So it became like, we're all going to go to film school too. So if you were, in my city, there was only a couple of me. There was me, Shade Roop, William and Walter Olson, who started their video company. They both passed away recently. Clark Von Trotha, Dave Shoemaker, Greg Smith. There wasn't a lot of us. And, I wanted to go to film school. So I knew that when I got to be a certain age, I was going to go to Los Angeles. And I went to the Evergreen State College and then transferred into USC in 1988. So literally 11 years, when I saw Star Wars when I was 10, 11 years later, I was in Los Angeles. And all of us first-generation imagination connoisseurs whose lives were changed literally by Star Wars, we all went to LA. There was Loyola Marymount, there was Northridge, there was USC and UCLA. So there was a lot of people when I moved down here, when I literally turned 21 and moved to LA. So when I came down here, and LA was a wondrous place. The Lakers had won, the Bloods and the Crips were still killing each other, but the whole city was, incredible. And there was so many film events. And when I got down here, I started meeting all of these people at various, you'd go to film screenings, you would go to, Revival House stuff. There was always something going on in LA. And there was conventions. There was Bruce Schwartz put on a convention at the Shrine Auditorium every month. There was Dr. Reed in the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films, where I met people like Brian Singer, who's also a student at USC. And there was just all of this stuff going on, and all these people that wanted to make movies and television and had been inspired by everything that was going on in the 80s, including all the music of the 80s, the fashion of the 80s, the explosion of comic books. I got really into comic books starting around the era of the Baxter versions of things like Frank Miller's Ronin or Camelot 3000, when Marvel started their direct sale, when they started Kazar, Micronauts, and Moon Knight. I started going to the comic book store every week. Found things like American Flag, the first comic stuff, Pacific Comics. It was incredible. And all through the 80s, it was music, movies, and television and comic books were just, it all fueled each other. In seeing things like a movie like The Hunger in 83 and seeing Bauhaus open that movie, it was like, oh my God, music and movies were colliding. John Hughes did crazy stuff. So pop culture in the 80s for an imagination connoisseur was incredible. Then we all wound up in LA, and we all started to meet one another. That's when I met Chris Gore, in like 1990 or whatever. He had parties at the Film Thread offices. I met Mark Altman, who he and Chris started Sci-Fi Universe magazine for Larry Flynt. And it was just this cornucopia of people that I met. And we all a lot of us worked our way into the entertainment business and kind of were still there. The thing was, in the 90s, when all of us met and we were all imagination connoisseurs, and it was a very supportive environment. We all started going to Comic-Con, and Comic-Con was just exploding. I remember when Mike Nichols' movie Wolf was being promoted, James Spader, Jack Nicholson came to Comic-Con. And that was obviously Batman 89 had come out, but Jack Nicholson coming to Comic-Con was insane. And that's when things started to change. In 94, when the Image guys came down, Rob Liefeld brought his 1-to-1 scale Youngblood spaceship, which is still one of my favorite Comic-Con stories ever. But it was all part of that first generation imagination connoisseur. Everybody saw Star Wars and everybody was becoming a creator. And it was a very nurturing environment. Everybody was supportive of everybody else. And not everybody wanted to get into movies. Some people wanted to do other things. But we all kind of circled around each other. And some people achieved great success. I became friends with Brian and was there when he had this event at the Directors Guild where he showed his first short film, Lion's Den, that was written by Chris McQuarrie, and then they got the money to make public access and went on and did Usual Suspects. There was a lot of that, and all these people, you'd run into Quentin Tarantino at events and he would talk to you. Not that he wouldn't, but he was, these people were all very accessible and they were all circling all around LA, and it was a very exciting place to be. And then I would say, around the late 2000s, the independent film explosion of the late 80s when Soderbergh put Sex, Lies, and Videotape on the, he put himself on the map at Sundance. It was just long story short, there was a lot of great stuff going on. For us, first generation imagination connoisseurs that saw Star Wars in the theater, that lived through the explosion of incredible science fiction, fantasy, and horror films that followed in the wake of that time. And it wasn't just Star Wars, it was also the slasher films, and it was Coscarelli making movies like Phantasm and Alien coming out, and Star Trek and the Black Hole. And the thing is, even a movie like The Black Hole, which, let's face it, it's not very good, but people were just excited to go see it, and it was like, wow, it's a big Disney, Harrison Ellen Shaw and robots that are from hell, and Maximilian Schell playing Captain Nemo. Nobody went and said, that sucked. I mean, we knew it was not good, but you still loved it anyway. And it's not that we had a critical, we lost our critical faculties. It was just that it was so exciting to go see these movies in a theater, in these gigantic theaters and the movie still had overtures, and, John Barry scored The Black Hole. And it was a great period of time. And all of it was sort of the fuel that I needed to propel me through the 80s, which was constantly exciting, to go into the 90s and deal with a bunch of shit, trying to get jobs, working on low-budget music videos where you may or may not get paid. In the 90s, I started working on low-budget movies, Arcade, got the job re-editing Arcade, and we would do anything. I became a paid Star Trek consultant for real, for Viacom. I worked on the Star Trek Experience. I had all kinds of craziness in the 90s. We were all in our 20s and early 30s, and it was really, really, really exciting. There was nothing like YouTube. And then you had sort of the people that came after us, which was kind of a different generation. I guess we were Gen Xers, call it Gen Xers, and maybe you want to call it millennials, but things started to change because instead of Star Wars, now you had a lot of people that wanted to be the next Tarantino, the next Kevin Smith, Jon Favreau and Doug Liman, and the movie Swingers was really influential to me, but I guess they were still part of our group. But the independent film explosion of the 90s, the late 80s and 90s, created a whole new generation of people that descended upon LA. Which also, people saw that they could have a voice. Star Wars did not make us, it didn't instill the fact that we would have a voice, but we wanted to be involved. But I think the independent film explosion and the Sundance kids gave the second wave of people the idea that they could have a voice themselves. They could come in and you could be Kevin Smith, man. You could go make a movie with your credit cards. You could read Premiere and you could read Spy and you could think, I'm going to be like one of those people. And there was the whole LA nightlife scene, and it was really, 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 really incredible. And then for me, by the time the 2000s rolled around, I directed Free Enterprise and the DVD market came up. So rather than bang my head against the wall, I got some great jobs working on special editions when the studios were paying huge amounts of money. And I got to work on the X-Men movies, and I got to work on Lord of the Rings and Narnia and all the things that I worked on, Superman Returns, through the aughts. That was great too. But anyway, taking me up to when I decided to start my own YouTube channel, I had had very high highs. I'd had very low lows. I had great triumphs in the entertainment business, and I had great defeats. And when I started to go onto YouTube and talk about on Collider Heroes, it sort of ignited a fire that was dimming in me. It was burning out, in the sense that what had kept me in LA and had kept me here dreaming, and despite all the setbacks and all the just ridiculousness of trying to get projects made and having so many doors shut in your face and things that were going to go or things that weren't going to go. And it's not a life I would recommend to a lot of people. And I was, seriously considering, what am I doing with my life? But by going on to YouTube, which was really interesting because I was still working. I was coming off of doing documentaries for Star Trek, working directly for CBS Home Entertainment for 3 years, working on the Star Trek Blu-rays for Next Generation, the whole restoration of that series, and working on Enterprise, and then working on the Star Trek fan film and editing movies. I was still doing what I wanted to do. Now, I had other than being a producer on the Agent Cody Banks movies, I had no great, huge commercial hits. But I had done all these interesting things that kept me going, that I was really proud of. But it was beginning to dwindle. So when YouTube came along, and when John Schnepp had me come on Heroes, and the MCU was very exciting to me. I never thought I would see an Avengers movie in my life. And when seeing where the MCU had began and leading all the way up through the Infinity Saga, it was just an amazing time. And I was seeing things I never thought I would see before. And then at the same time, across the street over at Warner Brothers, the Nolan Batman movies. Having worked on I'd been on Superman Returns for a year, and then seeing the Nolan Batman movies get made, and then, Man of Steel, which I really loved, and then seeing what was happening there as well. It was unfortunate that the powers that be at DC, they were trying to follow Marvel's success rather than pave their own way. They were looking across, we have to do Avengers work. And it's like, yeah, but you got to build that. You have to earn that. Marvel was meticulous. DC's like, we want it now. And if they didn't get exactly what they wanted, but I don't need to relitigate that. But by the time I got onto YouTube, it sort of reignited this fire. Like, oh my God, I could get excited about comic book movies again because I had to talk about them every day or every week. And then at one point we went daily. I mean, John Schnepp, Koi Shanru, Amy Dallin, whoever, Comic Book Girl, Annika. We had a great revolving cast of characters. And when I started my own channel in 2018, I started to get really excited about why I was here again. So that was a byproduct that I didn't know was going to happen. And after I started my own channel and people started coming to me that I didn't know, and suddenly, I guess I should have considered this, but when you go onto YouTube, you get an audience. You get an audience of people that you don't know. Like right now, I don't know who's watching this broadcast. I'm looking at a green light. I'm looking up into a camera. And then people start following you. And then what you do is they remember it. They say, remember when you said this or did that or you told this story? And suddenly there was a community that was started to develop around my own YouTube channel. Now, because I was doing other things, if YouTube was full-time for me, I could have done a lot more to grow this channel. I could have, asked for more subscribers or cut my videos into short things to really promote it as a business. It's not that I don't make money, I could have done a lot more to make this a bigger channel than it is, but I wouldn't have been able to do the other things I was doing at the time, like the Tango Shaloms or like the True Noir, which by the way is now done. You can get all 10 episodes at truenoir.co. But it was this community that started to build around this channel that became really, really exciting. And I started meeting people from all over the world, including people like Dieter Bastian, who I do Let's Get Physical Media with. And that was something I didn't realize would happen. Like anybody that starts a YouTube channel, I don't know if people talk enough about what it's like to develop a community of people around your channel. And it's a pretty wondrous, wonderful, scary thing. And you suddenly have a responsibility, I think, of providing something of value to the people that watch you, especially the people that have been watching you for a long time. And that was something I wasn't aware of that would happen. I should have known that working on Collider Heroes or working for John, but because I wasn't in the day-to-day, I'd come in and do the show like, hey, what's going on? And then I would leave. I wasn't seeing all the interaction that could happen. And I started doing things like reading people's letters and, hey, let's have a film festival, send some films in, and just doing stuff like off the cuff. I wouldn't really think it through, like, hey, let's do this. And suddenly you had people that were sending in pictures and making jokes. And Elizabeth and I did over like 100, we did 120 episodes of whining about movies. And suddenly people just wanted to watch the two of us. And it was a kind of an amazing thing. And to this day, right now, it's still an amazing thing. We have these member calls. There's been people I've been meeting for a long time that have been coming back, and I consider them friends. I remember meeting Roberto Suarez out in the wild. I went up to Portland to work on Crisis Medicine, and we had a meal together, and he came out, and I've gone other places, and I love meeting people all over the place. And then the pandemic hit, and then everything really started to explode because there was nothing else to do. So suddenly, like Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers, I know a lot of people say that he and I are diametrically opposed, but I remember streaming with him. He invited me to go. I've been watching Geeks and Gamers for years at this point. And Jeremy, I didn't realize it was going to be a controversial thing. Maybe kind of, but then I went on to his channel, which caused a little bit of a controversy, and he couldn't have been nicer. And we had a great talk. We were both fans. And I started, the philosophy behind what I was trying to do, which was foster communication between everybody. And I figured since the space that I exist in on YouTube, whether, we're all first and foremost fans. We all love science fiction, fantasy, and horror. We all love video games and comics and action figures and model kits, whatever your jam is, novels. So there was always common ground. And my feeling was my entire life, I talked to everybody. When I was in high school, I was kind of friends with everybody. I liked everybody. I didn't care if you were a punk, a stoner. You know, I didn't care if you were in the drama club. I didn't care. I just liked people. I liked talking to people and hearing from people and like, what do you do? And I was always the kind of guy that's, hey, you guys, you do this, let's get together and let's put on a show, you know, as Graham Norton might say. And I figured that I kind of brought that to the YouTube space. So it has been mostly an incredibly positive experience being in this ecosystem. I will say over the last 5 years, it has shifted. Like I've had people come after me on social media, which is to be expected. But there's the same way that there's identity politics out in the world. There's now weird identity politics happening in this YouTube film space. And I don't mean talking about identity politics in film and television. I mean, people themselves have identity issues about what they do and don't like. It's become a lot more tribal than it used to be. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that I think fans today are far more media. They're fans of the media, and they haven't read comic books. They haven't read novels. They haven't read or listened to a lot of great music. They've become, because there's a lot more of it. A lot of the great material to be fans of, you know, it's a generational thing. And I would say like Star Wars was galvanizing for me. I would say, to be honest, Star Trek: The Next Generation was galvanizing for another group of people. And then seeing movies like Jurassic Park, I would say in the 90s, from Jurassic Park, but The Matrix and Harry Potter, for a lot of people, the influx of anime for female fans, gaming and anime. I mean, I remember Comic-Con seeing people forget this, but how much Sailor Moon did for female fandom, and cosplaying brought female fans in. So it's, you know, watched it all change, and it's been wonderful to see. And then multi-generations, people like myself, we grew up and had kids, and we bring them to Comic-Con, and they like different things. And now there's a generation of people. We're seeing the results of Minecraft and the things, the newest generation, and what they're passionate about, whether it's video games, meme culture, TikTok. Mr. Beast is probably going to end up being one of the most inspirational or galvanizing figures for young people today. And now we didn't have we had no outlet. User-generated content did not exist. And nowadays, with the advent of phones and everyone carrying around 4K cameras, the world has changed. What I do sort of lament is the fact that because there is not a diversity of mediums, that most people are either watching things or playing things. There's not a lot of reading, I've noticed. And by reading, reading is an introspective internal activity. And not a lot of people are out there defending, people are fans of Harry Potter. We've seen a lot of these great literary, whether the young adult explosion, beginning with Harry Potter, leading to the Hunger Games and a bunch of other different things. So it's very different. It's a different thing, but also it's all based in the same kind of fandom. But what's really interesting is when I was growing up as a fan, you had to go to places where there were other fans, like conventions. So you were having conversations face to face. And if you wanted to argue whether Doctor Who or Star Trek was better, you were standing face to face with someone, and you had to learn how to communicate. You had to learn how to be respectful. The anonymity of the internet, especially in fan circles, and I saw that happening in the 90s. I was going on to message boards and getting in flame wars with people and all of that, but it has changed now, and there's a lot more mean-spirited. There's a mean-spirited thing happening that didn't used to happen because the anonymity of the internet has given also everyone a voice. And you can be sitting at home, you don't have to put very much out. You don't have to go anywhere anymore. You can go onto the internet. And look, I admit to you that this channel has been a place where I say, hey, it's like a convention. So come say what you want. And, you know, I always invite people to come on the channel, but it's a different time and place. There's a lot of people firing in some questions and comments, and let me get on these. Royston S. Bailey sends in a super chat and says, here's to many more. Well, thanks for that. Danny Dank. Are those dank nugs, Danny? The good old days of watching Heroes with Schnepp. Thank you for continuing to be a voice in the space and an inspiration the true inspiration for us connoisseurs. Thank you. That's very, very nice of you to say. Miss 50 and still metal says welcome. She became a member of the channel. Thank you very much. iCritic has been a member for 24 months. And he asks, with the viral videos of Minecraft attendees causing ruckus, it highlights one of the reasons theaters are in trouble. The new generation seems incapable of simply watching a movie without any interaction. Yeah, I think that's a problem. I mean, there's been enough studies. If you read Jonathan Haidt's work, the attention span of young people, the dopamine hits you get from, I mean, let's face it, there is an addiction problem, an input. I wouldn't just say a screen addiction. I would say an input addiction. Like, I mean, when I was growing up, I would wait for books. And when a certain book would come, I would run up to my room and sit there all day to the point where my parents would knock on the door going, are you okay? And I would read an entire book, over an 8-hour span or whatever. Yes, there's something different. But I think the movie theater thing, I think there's something going on there. One of the 4DX, I don't know which chain it is, but they're deeming April 20th, what is it, the meme, Chicken Jockey Day? Is that what's called? Chicken Jockey Day? Where they're encouraging people to interact. And I think what I do love about that, look, I don't ever want to go to a movie where that happens, but in this particular film, it's a communal experience for everybody that loves Minecraft. And when this happens, everybody knows and gets it. And even though it's a product of meme culture, it's still a collective experience. And while the movie itself might be less important than the chicken jockey moment for you, I do like the fact that people are going to movie theaters. We saw it with Barbenheimer. We saw it with the Barbie movie and Oppenheimer together. The movies might be less important. I mean, what's happened now is, and I've said this a million times on this channel, we looked out, but the new generation looks in. Our generation was looking outward, but now with user-generated content, everyone's looking at everybody else. And I think that the chicken jockey phenomenon is a result of that, but it's also showing that people still like to have those communal experiences and share them. So I don't know what that means in the long run, but I think it's something new. It's an evolution. So where that's going, I don't know. Benjamin Gaskell says, congratulations on a decade of YouTube captaincy, brother. Thanks for the warm company, particularly in the pandemic years. Thanks very much. Good luck going forward. And please keep advocating for a new punk do-it-yourself movement in music and film. Well, I always will advocate for that because there's more technology now than ever before. And people can make almost anything. Captain Robert April says, now I'm really PO'd that the United States Air Force wouldn't let me cross-train to the film unit at Norton Air Force Base. We'd have met years earlier. That might be very true. Blue Flame Studio sends in New Zealand $10. Thank you for that. I have to say, man, I did love the time that I spent in New Zealand between 2001 and 2004. I'd go back in a second. I wish I could find a project to work on there. The people there in New Zealand are incredible. The whole country's incredible. The food's incredible. Monteith's Black. Man, I love that beer. I discovered Kilkenny, the cream of Ireland in New Zealand. What a place. The music, Fat Freddy's Drop? My God. You want to go down a rabbit hole? Watch Fat Freddy's Drop videos on YouTube. Whoo! What a band. I got to see him twice live in New Zealand. It was incredible. Loved it. Mashby became a member of the channel. Mashby, welcome. The Dead Man says, what I really miss is Midnight Musings with Lael and RM. Well, RM went to Asia to work. She disappeared. Tomorrow, I will be on Lael's channel, and he wants to talk to me about True Noir. So come join us at 8. Dieter Bastian is there. Hey, Dietz, what's up, man? You're sending me a super chat? What should I buy with that? Hello, Rob. I still can't believe I'm a little part of your YouTube journey now for over 4 years. So, Rob, thanks for inviting me. Get us Rennie, goddammit. I'm working on that, son. I'm going to get Rennie Harlan to come on the channel. You just can't tell him about the review of Long Kiss Goodnight. B Things says, the introspection of reading is something that I really think is lost when people say that listening to audiobooks is reading. Reading demands that you focus on the book, not do your dishes. Oh, I totally agree. To be honest, I think I've listened to one audiobook in its entirety, and that was the World War Z audiobook. And I only did that. I bought the book and read it, and then I got the audiobook. I will say I read Kid Stays in the Picture, but Robert Evans, his audiobook of The Kid Stays in the Picture that he narrates is incredible. But yeah, I think not reading has done a huge disservice to imagination connoisseurs, because the concepts in a lot of these books are incredibly mind-expanding. And I think to not read science fiction is, I think people are, it just teaches you how to think more. It broadens your horizons. And I think in a world where we're going to have to start dealing with the ramifications of quantum computing, I think a really great background in literary science fiction is going to be helpful for people. I really do. Sheriff Carl sends in a tip for $6.66. That's very metal, Carl. One of the most metal stories I've ever read is from the Old Norse Völuspá, Egil's saga. I am not familiar with this. Are you familiar with is it Egil? Stalagrimson? He is believed to be a real person, and if he was real, he's about the most metal as fuck motherfucker ever. Would make an awesome movie. I need to read that. Sheriff Carl goes on. He's sending in a bunch of things. Okay, let me catch up on Sheriff Carl. Congrats on 10 years, dude. Today is also 40 years since the debut album of Iron Maiden. You are in the most esteemed company. You've been one of my favorite voices of reason on here for most of your 10 years. Thanks for being metal as fuck always. Here's to 10 more. Well, here's to you, Sheriff Carl. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And then he goes on to say, 45 years since Maiden's debut. I'm stoned. I love that you talk about your pal John Schnepp so warmingly. It's important to keep our fallen friends' memories and works alive. You're a genuine good cat, my man. You make Seattle proud. Well, I hope so. I love Seattle. I'd love to come back, really. Miss 50 and Still Metal. One day we got to meet Miss 50 and Still Metal. Congrats, Rob. The power of everyone having a story to tell and being real, kind, and authentic will continue to be your currency. Take Elizabeth out to dinner and celebrate. PGS folks are damn good people. Keep creating. Stay Trekkie and metal. By the way, you can be metal and be a Trekkie. People might not believe it. And then Colt writes, it is I, Rob Cuntlicker, Jedi Freak. I'm here to pleasure you, princess. Your OB-GYN can no longer help you. You are to take me to your 70s Wookiee porn collection after I've petted your ferocious Ewok. May the Force bind you. That's pretty good, Colt. I like that one. That's good. That is good. 1001 Johnny says everyone should start watching Ultraman. Sci-fi and fantasy that has captured imaginations for 60 years next year, and it's still going strong. That's amazing. 60 years, man. That's older than Star Trek, but a little younger than Doctor Who. That's incredible. Lee Crow says, $20 super chat. Thank you, Lee. Says, congrats, Rob. To be honest, I didn't find y'all until Infinity War came out. I love the mostly positive, aka honest, movie talk space. Here's to many more years of your commentary. Taking a shot to you now. Well, I have my little... this is the only pre-made cocktail I like. I like this so much, but I'm going to drink to you guys. Let me tell you something, too. I need to address the movie pundit space for a minute. Fun with Collecting sends in a tip and says, cheers to a decade. $10 for a drink or physical media? Both, if you're good at sales. I love that. I wanted to say, a lot of people criticize me and for talking to certain people, for going on certain channels. And I have to say that I genuinely like the people that I interact with. And I really do. And while some of them are brash, some of them are coarse, some of them don't pull their punches, I have found everybody in the YouTube space, it's ironically, the only people, they're the people that I was interacting with for quite some time that were not. But for the most part, all the people that I interact with or shows that I go on are really great people. And I have to say, Gary Beekler, Nerdrotic, when I went to his first, it wasn't last year's, I think it was 2 years ago at CinemaCon, I went to one of his nerd meetups. I believe he's having one this week. I don't know if it was tonight, but in Vegas. I was shocked at that experience. First of all, everybody was just delightful. And I explained, I met a guy who rode his bike down from Edmonton, Canada, his motorcycle. There were people from Asia. And, Gary he doesn't even drink. He bought everybody drinks, bought everybody tacos. He didn't have to do that. Met his lovely wife, who she and I were like, we would have been best friends in high school with our music taste. And it was the first time I saw a large gathering of the YouTube audience outside at an event that was put on by Gary. He found a venue, got everybody to come down. People showed up. And it was an unbelievably positive experience. And everybody there was so happy to be there. Nobody was angry. Nobody was mean. Nobody was the things you might think. Not true at all. The audience there, I was blown away. And it was, I still think about it now as a positive experience. He saw him at Comic-Con this year. And it really taught me something, that you can really get the wrong idea if you don't give people a chance. But that audience that Gary put together, that all came together, was incredible. And it was an incredible, I wish if I had a larger channel, if the channel made more money, I would hit the road. I would go on, I would show free enterprise and speak, do what Kevin Smith did, and I'd do the same thing. Buy some food trucks, bring it down and feed everybody and say, hey, let's have a good time. That's if I could do that with the channel, I totally would. But it was really, and that's what I said. I've had a very positive experience with a lot of other people in the YouTube space, and I've been treated very well and very respectfully by everyone. And I really enjoy whether it's George Giant Slayer, whether it's Chris Gore's channel. I love going on Versus, whether it's John Campia's channel, whether it's Critical Drinker or Gary or any of these people. I have a lot of respect, and I like all these people very much. And I really enjoy a lot of the commentators. Like each guy or each person, each group has their own, I met Az. We've done so much together. Az and I we were doing Fully Articulated, Hot Toys. We were doing great reviews of The Prisoner and Squid Game. And I've never met Az in person. He's my favorite Yorkshire man, though, and he's got a hell of a Transformers collection. And do you think I would ever give up the opportunity to have met and streamed with Az and done the great shows we've done, or Anthony's 6-Scale Mafia, or Lael and all his group, all those guys on the action figure side? I love doing that. I love all those people. And, there have been times, when I've had shitty days, and if I can sit down and, stream with some people and forget, I mean, I don't have to drink alone. I can do a YouTube channel and drink on the channel and talk to my friends, which is like being in a bar. So that's good too. So yeah, Sheriff Carl says, says Egil, like Egil. He was a drunk poet by age 4, even performing to Viking kings. He killed his first, an older boy who bullied him in a field with an axe to his skull. His mother said he will be a great Viking. He was like more asshole Nordic Conan. Oh, I love it. I will have to look into this, Sheriff Carl. Zachary Zabali says, hey, Rob, why didn't the Lord of the Rings behind the scenes fail to mention that Tolkien was a devoted Catholic? Catholicism was a huge part of his life. That's a good question. I mean, it's hard for me to say because I got so ensconced with C.S. Lewis, and we talked a lot about the religious backgrounds of both Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. But I think probably, because when you're doing behind the scenes, you still have to deal with what the legal department of the studios tell you to. Like, I've told the story when I was doing the audio commentary for Star Trek V. And in the audio commentary, Shatner mentions that Timothy Leary was a big inspiration for Sybok. And I got notes back from Paramount Legal that said, you can't say Timothy Leary was an inspiration for Sybok. And I'm like, Shatner said it. It's in his commentary. No, you have to cut it out. And I'm like, why would you cut that out? And then I get back that the lawyers are like, well, you can't talk about drugs on Star Trek. And I'm like, wait, what? I mean, from Mud's Women in the first season of TOS to the first season Symbiosis in the first season of Next Generation, where you literally have one system getting another system high and profit off of their addiction to drugs. Star Trek has always dealt with certain kinds of drugs. Even Q in Encounter at Farpoint gets a little high. So you still are at the whims of the studio. So that's probably why. And also, you want to get, we didn't go into Tolkien, Professor Tolkien's history enough. I agree with you. But yeah, I mean, but I'm not saying that even the studio said not to do that. I think we're just more focusing on the making of the movie. So, yeah, that's what I would say. Tom Jr. Jackson says, sorry I drive you to drink. And congrats on 10 years. Well, here's to you, my friend. It's great to have you as chief moderator of the channel. It's been great getting to know you, too. So, yeah. 200 Watt Studio says, God bless you, Rob, for all you've done and your YouTube channel. It's fantastic. Really appreciate tonight's topic. As I've been toying with doing my YouTube channel, I worked in the industry, just not to the same extent as you. Listen, 200 Watt Studio, I would say that you should start your own YouTube channel, because then maybe you will come around and understand the greatness that is William Friedkin's 1985 masterpiece. Say it with me now. To Live and Die in L.A. That's right. No, one of the things, there's been a lot of people that have jumped into the YouTube space, and I would encourage everyone to do so. To have a voice is a good thing. And people have asked me, what is the most important thing that you've learned about being on YouTube? I think the most important thing for anyone thinking about coming onto YouTube is figure out what is it about you that makes your voice different than anyone else's. Anybody can just come on and talk about movies. But what is your perspective on movies? What is it that you're going to do differently than someone else? It's really important to have your singular voice that people want to hear and listen to. I'm a huge fan of look, I'll admit it, I'm a dude, even though I'm getting too old, but I like watching female YouTubers, especially in the genre space. And because when I was growing up, there were not, despite the fact Amy Dallin used to get mad when I said this, I knew some girls that were fans of like Star Wars, but there were not women that were fans of, that were reading a lot of science fiction that you could talk to. You could find them at conventions, certainly. But, one of my favorite YouTubers, and yeah, I understand she's beautiful. Okay? But that's not why she was recommended to me. Impression Blend. She hasn't done as much stuff, but she started covering books, and her taste in horror films is exemplary. And she's well watched, I guess you would say. So if you want to see a female YouTuber who, yeah, she's beautiful, but she's also very smart, and her analysis is spot on. And go back and watch her lists of books and her best horror films of the year. She's got great taste. So her channel's Impression Blend. Check that out. And I'm a huge fan of Snarky J. I love Snarky J. I think Snarky J is great. Hi, y'all. I just think she's awesome. And she's Snarky J. You get what you... And she loves what she does. And I wish when I was 24 years old, I'd known someone like her. But there's a lot of great... And there's a lot of, like, Rick Beato, who's a music guy. If you haven't watched Rick Beato's channel, his channel's incredible. And the Professor of Rock. I mean, he came around during the pandemic, and watching his channel grow and flourish. I love Professor of Rock, and I love Rick Beato's channels. I became a fan of Polyphia, thing like that. So it's incredibly frustrating to see that happen. B Thing says the movie before Star Trek V made an LSD joke. Yeah, but you know what? I know nobody cared. It was in San Francisco, so they could, but they weren't actually talking about expanding your mind. It's so silly what people have said, but you're absolutely right. That's a very good point, Jason Webster. But I did try, or B Things, I tried to fight it, but it didn't work. Jason Webster says, Rob, where would we be without your insightful knowledge on the American film industry, contemporary culture, and epic humorous rants on Star Trek? You inform and entertain us all. You just reminded me, I was going to talk about something that I think that the biggest change that has happened in the world of imagination connoisseurdom, the biggest change that has happened, the singular biggest change over the last, well, let's call it the last 50 years, is all of the things that we were fans of, whether it was music, movies, not so much TV, comics, all of these things. It used to be that the creator was the person that you fell in love with. Like when I started reading comic books, when I read, again, in the early 80s, when I came across Howard Chaykin's American Flag, everything about Howard Chaykin's American Flag, he wrote, hang on, excuse me, he wrote, and I'm not dying, he wrote and drew it, and I loved his art, and Ken Brusenak's lettering. Everything about American Flag blew my mind. And I became a fan of Howard Chaykin and his work. And I think, whether it was Gene Roddenberry, also had Gene Kuhn and his writers, David Gerrold, Dorothy Fontana. But Star Trek was fighting against the corporation, the fighting against the network. And all of our favorite creators, Don Coscarelli took years to make Phantasm. I adore Phantasm. What has happened is Ghostbusters. Ivan Reitman and all the comedians, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, Bill Murray. I mean, it was a product of their collective insanity. And Boss Films, 65mm effects work, and Sigourney Weaver and Rick Moranis. The things that we fell in love with were the products of the creatives they had to fight against. I mean, the movie companies, they were working in tandem. But now the biggest difference is the Star Wars, the Star Treks, it's flipped. Star Wars is owned by Disney. It's not made by people that love Star Wars and they're going to make what they can make. What Disney is doing is they're looking for creatives to work within their auspices, to work on their brand. And I think the anger that a lot of people feel is because the reasons that things are made today are just not the same. They're not the results of the creative impulse anymore. They're the results of money. They're the results of a corporation has bought a brand and they want to continue to exploit that brand. The problem is the brands are the result of creativity. And the thing is, you can't take a brand that's based on creativity, and that's why it exploded, and then try and shoehorn people in to make more of it. It doesn't work. It's totally in the it's in the reverse of how real creativity happens. And so what we see is these companies want to keep these brands going, but the act of creation is in itself fraudulent. It's fraudulent creation because it's not based on real creative ideas. It's based on a corporation that wants to keep exploiting their brand that was originally created by creative people. That's the big difference. And we as fans are looking at these things thinking, why is it these things that we love, that made us who we are today, that forged us as imagination connoisseurs, how come they have let us all down? And it's because we want to believe that they're the same that they always were. But now they're completely at the control or at the whim of a corporation. And a corporation doesn't know how to tell a story. A corporation doesn't know how to write a script. A corporation doesn't know how to act. And so you have the reins of power that can control whether these things get made or not are with the wrong people. And they're never going to make a decision that's going to allow the best creative. I mean, I think as far as Star Wars goes, hiring Tony Gilroy was a masterstroke, and letting him alone, whether you love Andor or not, it is a singular creative vision. And I think that Andor Season 2 is going to blow people away. But I think that the act of creation of Andor is not fraudulent. And I wish the same thing would happen. I mean, I think Terry Matalas and his team for Star Trek Picard Season 3 took the reins and were able to create something that was truly based on a desire to bring back a certain kind of Star Trek that was missing. And they were able to get away with it because the controls that would normally be there were gone. You know, Alex Kurtzman went off to do Man Who Fell to Earth. Akiva Goldsman was interested in Strange New Worlds, luckily, and we got Picard Season 3. And everybody's angry about it because the decisions that made the things that we love are totally reversed. It used to be the collision of art and commerce, and now there's just commerce. That maybe a little bit of art, if it's not pounded away, gets through. And that's the difference. That's the biggest difference in what's happened, is that all of our favorite things have been turned into franchises. And when there is money to be made, the act of creation is not in the hands of the creators anymore. And, you know, sometimes it might work. You might get a creator who's able to create something despite the oversight. But a lot of the time, you can't do that, which is a bummer. So, let's see. 200 Watt Studio sends in a second. This is, I think you're continuing on. He says, your YouTube channel is fantastic. Really appreciate tonight's topic. As I've been toying with doing my YouTube channel, I worked in the industry, not the same extent as you. And he goes on to say, and I wrote for Famous Monsters and other papers in Los Angeles. I didn't know that. I want to examine films and the history and structure, but I'm struggling to learn the editing process. Also, is my knowledge and voice interesting? Any advice? He also sent a $220 super chat. Well, here's the thing. You can't worry about whether or not your voice is interesting and your knowledge, because just what you've described, working for Famous Monsters, that's your experience is different than anyone else's. No one's experience is the same. So what would be interesting is just tell your story and, you know, get into the film history that you enjoy. Everybody likes listening to things about the past, stories about various aspects of the entertainment business and what you know, and lean into that. I apologize for coughing. I haven't been able to get rid of this for like 2 weeks, which is weird. But, and it's not COVID. But that's what I would say, is that figure out what is it you have to offer, which is different. your experience is different than anyone else's, and lean into that, which I think is important. 200 Watt Studio says, I had a second $20 super chat you missed. Oh, no, it hadn't refreshed. I apologize. Super chat from Blue Sunrise says, Rob, your live streams have taught me a lot. I'm learning to listen more and find value in hearing other stories, and I'm less obsessed with myself, which I think I really needed to learn. That's about the nicest thing you could say to me. Thank you. But you know what? It's both. You should be obsessed with yourself, but you learn more when you listen to other people about how to maybe inform or better inform your own life. So that's always a good thing. Paul Allan Bernardo, Paul Allan Bernardo says, what a milestone, Rob. Thank you for all the great sweaty nerd content over these past 10 years on YouTube. Let's see what the next 10 years bring. Well, I really hope, to be honest, that I can spend less time on YouTube and more time on things like True Noir, because making things is my true love, and I don't know. You know, every time you make something, you never know, are you going to be able to do something like that again? Checkers the Inventor says, Checkers the Inventor, he's a PGS hero, celebrates 40 months of membership. And Checker says, Rob, you and John seem to have a different understanding of box office theater revenue. He says theaters get 33%. You say 50%. Now you have to understand, it actually fluctuates. I just say 50% because it's easier to understand. It really depends which studios you're talking about. I mean, which theater chain you're talking about, and who they're making deals with. For the most part, I would say 50%. It can be 33%. It really just depends. And it depends how big the theater chain is. It depends what they negotiate. But for the most part, I think the studio math works out more when you say 50. Sometimes it can be 40. In China, we get back less than 50%. So it's different, depending. Laserbeam Hawkins says, hard to believe I've been listening to you for 10 years. I was introduced to you from watching your guest appearances on ME. Oh, Midnight's Edge. Oh, on Midnight's Edge. Been watching ever since. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Laserbeam Hawkins. That's a great name. Your thoughts on the Megan phone stunt. Tom Jr. Jackson is talking about, so Megan came out and said, well, Megan 2.0 said that they were going to have second screen content for your phone while you watched Megan 2. Did that turn out to be a stunt that they just did to fuck with people? Which would be a great stunt. You say phone stunt, but I think it was a bad idea. Who wants to see that anyway? That would not be a good thing. So, is it a phone stunt? Was that not true? I didn't know whether that's true or not. Because that would be, if it was, that's very funny. That's very, very funny. I will assume it is a stunt because you are saying it's a stunt. Roger says, who's been a member for 24 months, says, good to see you tonight. Congrats on 10 years. Hope you feel better soon. I feel pretty good. This chest, I mean, do I have walking pneumonia? I don't know. But I feel okay. I better not drop dead because, well, I can't now because True Noir is finished, but there's still more to do. More to do. But anyway, I didn't do a really good job now that I think about it because I didn't know really I didn't plan what I was going to say. I wanted to talk more about the YouTube space and get more into the nitty gritty of how do you make money and what more can you do here. But I guess I got to talk a little bit about the idea more of being a geek pundit and having a new lease on life. Like in 2010, we have a new lease on life from the landlord when Jupiter gets turned into a star. I guess ultimately, I just want to say thanks to all of you, all the people that continue to tune in, and the audience means a lot. And for the most part, I love everybody out there, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been a great experience. And look, I know there's a lot of people raking me over the coals about my opinion of James Gunn's Superman. I don't shill for anybody. I know James Gunn. I worked with James Gunn a long time ago. I really like James Gunn. I think he's got a track record worth believing in. And as somebody who, it's hard to explain to people, but George Reeves was my first Superman. The Adventures of Superman, when I watched when I was a kid, I love that show. The 50s show. You know, Superman would jump out a window. He would fly like this. I loved The Adventures of Superman when I was a kid. That was my first Superman. And then when I saw Superman the movie, when I was 11, that was an amazing experience. Superman 2 was an amazing experience. Superman 3 and 4, not so much. So, for me, when I was reading 80s comic books, I could read Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, and I also could read Batman and the Outsiders, and enjoy them both in the same week. So I was always open to seeing all different iterations of these characters. I had Superboy. I had Lois and Clark. You know, there was all different iterations of Superman that I had seen growing up, reading, watching them on television, all of those things. So I think I'm much more open to all different kinds of permutations of different superhero movies. I find the obsession with Zack Snyder's vision of Superman, which, again, the operatic metal nature of it all is great, but I don't think it's well-rounded. I don't think Zack Snyder's image of what he wanted out of his I love Man of Steel, but I liked it more as a first contact science fiction take on Superman as much as a Superman film. I didn't think Zack Snyder's take on Superman was very well-rounded. And the thing about the Superman character is it is well-rounded. I mean, the great interpretations of Superman have a little bit more humanity to them. Now, I understand a lot of people love Zack Snyder's Superman, and I love Zack Snyder's Justice League. I thought it was a huge win. But I find it interesting that part of punditry now is actively hoping that James Gunn fails, which I don't understand. I mean, anybody that grew up loving DC Comics knows there's so many different iterations of Superman, depending on which creator worked on Superman. And I think the idea of a much more fantastical Superman film that is more of a Silver Age, Max Fleischer, that kind of Superman. We've never seen that before on screen. So for that reason alone, I'm curious to see it. I don't see why that's such a hard thing to comprehend or deal with. It's weird to be vehemently opposed to something you haven't seen yet. Now, look, I'm vehemently opposed to, say, Nazis, but we've seen them before. Whereas James Gunn's Superman we haven't seen. And to me, what if it's great? What if it's wildly entertaining and fun? Don't we want that to be the case? I mean, isn't that what we're looking for? And whether we want it or not, we are getting it. We're getting a gigantic new vision of Superman from the filmmaker that gave us 3 Guardians movies, The Suicide Squad, which I like very much, Starro. When I was a kid, I loved Starro. I'd go to the beach, and every time, sometimes you'd go buy a starfish. What was the first thing a little kid did? What did I do? I put a starfish on my face and would walk around going, I'm possessed by Starro. I mean, to have Starro in a movie, and James Gunn did that, and make you feel for King Shark when he's watching people make out in a doorway. Oh, King Shark will never have that, will he? I mean, I'm willing to see what he does. I mean, why not? I want Fantastic Four to be good. I want Thunderbolts to be good. And we're getting them. So why not hope they're great? It's a lifestyle choice, Sheriff Carl says, one of the most metal stories I've ever read is from the old... Oh, wait. That's old. I'm old, reading an old one. Sorry, there was something else that popped up from Peter. Peter says, do you think movie theaters will ever encourage people to use their phones in some kind of interactive way with the movie where you watch 2 screens at the same time? I hope not. I mean, look, that's not watching movies anymore. I mean, the whole thing about movie watching, and look, whether I'm old-fashioned or not, but I think what our modern civilization is doing to us is it's making us incapable of focusing on our attention, focusing on our attention on anything. And I think that's incredibly dangerous. And the thing about a movie is you basically go into a sensory deprivation tank where the lights come down and you focus on the screen. Now, I am no neurologist, but I would imagine that when you're in that position, somehow your mind's eye or your brain opens up where all you're doing is focusing on that story. And I would imagine, if I use myself as an example, when I'm in a movie theater, nothing else matters. My brain opens up and the story takes over all of my cognitive reasoning, at least while I'm watching it. I would never want to break that spell, because when you're breaking that spell, whatever's going on there in that movie theater is interrupted and you're completely changing your focus. And I think it's a terrible, terrible thing. So, yeah, I hope they never do that. And I think this split focus is really harming. I often say that watching movies is a skill you have to learn. Well, learning how to read, learning how to watch movies, learning how to do anything, learning how to build a model, learning how to woodwork, learning how to paint, all of that requires the ability to focus. And if we're losing that, we're going to be in a world of hurt. So, but that's just me. Coach sipping Jamba Juice out of a straw says, can't be amiss some info about Ash. It made $1 million and had a budget of $500,000. The director's name is Flying Lotus. I said that. Got good reviews. It did get good reviews. And it sounded pretty good. I definitely want to see that. I mean, I want to get it. Darth Plato says, I discovered you on Midnight's Edge, if you recall. I do recall that vaguely. Yeah. And REG has been a member for 13 months. Been an Imagination Connoisseur. Sam Phillip says, hey, Rob, I've been listening to you for about 4 years now. I don't watch all of your live streams, but when I do, I always learn something new and interesting. I'm from Chicago. Come visit the Music Box. Oh, man, ever since I saw that video on the Music Box. So at CinemaCon, they made these videos, I think they're online, where you could see various theater owners and their independent theaters. And the one that made me obviously True Noir is all set in Chicago. I went to Chicago working on it. I'll be back in Chicago probably in June. But the Music Box Theaters is independently owned theater that has like they can project any kind of theatrical. I would imagine Sinners will be screening there, I would hope. But I definitely want to go to the Music Box. So Sam, I will have to do that. I will have to come and be at the Music Box. Nova 1972 says, hey Rob, I've been listening to you since September 13th, 2019, the anniversary of the Space 1999 show. Amazing. 200 Watt Studio says, one of my favorite JLA covers was Brian Boland's Starro cover. Was geeked to see it on the screen. I know. And there's a lot of people that would say Starro is stupid. But, you know, again, reading Justice League as a kid, I liked Starro when they brought him back, you know, and there's that great modern run from the JLA where they have that. It was great. B Thing says, your focus determines your reality. Yes, indeed. We need more of that. We need more focus, which we don't have. Well, listen, everyone, I'm going to end this 10th anniversary stream. I want to thank again everybody for being here, being a part of this channel. I mean, couldn't do it without you. You're going to see a lot more of me on these streams, I promise. Yeah, I'll be coming back more and more. Michael Thomas Harrison asks again, Rob, your thoughts on Red Letter Media's new Star Trek The Motion Picture review. I've watched half of it up to where I always say Plinkett. I know it's Mike. But they get to the end of the movie. It's about halfway through the review when he gets to the end of going through all the special edition stuff. I mean, you know, we're birds of a feather. Mike and I see. I discovered that was, you know what, I'll tell you something. It was Red Letter Media's review of Generations. They did, before they did their famous prequel reviews. Plinkett did the review of Generations. This is the stupidest. I mean, it was, when I saw that review, I'm like, oh, there's people that think like we do elsewhere in the universe. And all of those 4 reviews of the Next Generation films were so bang on. And then when I saw the reviews of the prequel trilogy, I mean, I thought those were some of my favorite things that I saw on early YouTube. And I've always loved them since. Another thing, the Oral Knots, Freestyle Bane. Freestyle Bane is still one of my favorite YouTube videos ever. If you haven't seen Freestyle Bane, I love... The Oral Knots are kind of hit and miss sometimes, but I really love them. And Freestyle Bane's one of my favorite videos on the internet. I should go back and do a compilation of all my favorite YouTube videos, but that's definitely... Cinemania's Monster Madness. Cinemania's Monster Madness Godzilla-thon. Those reviews of the Godzilla movies. And Destroyer! That's the best one. If you know those, I mean, those are the things that I locked in on. And a lot of them are like over 10 years old. But that's what got me watching YouTube stuff. Those are the kinds of things that I was seeking out. So, what does that say about me? I don't know. But Cinemania's Monster Madness Godzilla-thon. Godzilla versus Destroyer. It's just, it kills me. And now that guy's like grown up and he does these erudite reviews, I'm like, that's the same dude that did the Cinemania's Monster Madness Godzilla-thon like 15 years ago. I don't know. YouTube's it's a fun, strange place. But anyway, I'm going to say goodnight. And got a few things I have to do work-wise. And I want to thank all of you. I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson. I want to thank all the members. I want to thank everybody that supports this channel via super chats and tips. And you know what? I'm going to have news. We were going to do a short story competition I want to publish an anthology called The Imagination Connoisseurs. I've got to figure out, people have sent stories in. We still have them. They're still valid. I'm going to have to charge a fee, an entry fee, because I don't want people sending me a bunch of AI-generated crap. I have a professional editor who's going to edit the stories. But, I want to do like 10,000 word or less short stories. And the book is going to be called The Imagination Connoisseurs. And what we're going to do is we're going to run the contest, and then we're going to crowdfund the book itself, because I want to do it like Brandon Sanderson but it's all going to be written by you guys. But the premise is, what is an imagination connoisseur? Write a story that either means something to imagination connoisseurs, defines imagination connoisseurs, delves into becoming an imagination connoisseur. It's totally open. But the anthology will be called The Imagination Connoisseurs, and I want it to be like at least 400 pages. And I want to make it like the hardcover, dust-jacketed, slip-cased. Well, I can't, like that book right there. But that's what I want to do. So start thinking about that. I'm going to launch it. I'm going to try and have the short story competition ready to launch on my birthday, my real birthday, which is May 15th. And then I'm going to run the contest probably through the summer and end at the end of the summer for entries, and then pick the entries and try and have the book out and available by Christmas. That would be the plan. That's the plan. So think about it. If you want to write a short story, there you go. So before I die of whatever this horrible bug that refuses to be, I mean, how can I drink old fashions and not kill whatever's in my stomach? I mean, come on. What's up, man? And on that note, and this vitamin infused, by the way, this is just water drop cola. You put in water. There's no sugar or anything in it. It's got a little bit of vitamins. That's it. But on that note, there we go. So remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you... Actually, hang on a second. 1001 Johnny says, "Hey, Rob, a really good YouTube channel you should look at is The Aged Great, where a Gen X comedian relays to his millennial friend older movies that might not be PC, but maybe they have aged more gracefully than a modern audience thinks. Not really. That's really interesting. This Aged Great. It's called This Aged Great. I'll go check that out right now. What a great see, I love channels like that, and I really like, there's so many more YouTube channels I watch, like Trigonometry. Of course, I do watch Rogan. I love long form discussion shows, science shows. I've been watching way too many quantum computing shows, or shows about quantum computing, which is fascinating. I also watch a lot of spaceship model building channels. The way some people watch porn, I watch spaceship model building channels. Yeah. So, the world of Wayne. Welcome to my world. Welcome to the world of Wayne. You got to watch that. He always builds partwork kits, but anything to do with like painting the Millennium Falcon, I've watched those videos for hours and hours and hours. Anyway, on that note, I'm going to get off this channel. I'm not going to get off on this channel, but I'm going to get off this channel tonight. I want to thank everybody. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. By the way, I forgot to read an article. It had nothing to do with film YouTube, but it was from the New York Times. There's a link in the description. The State of Punditry Part 3, Are YouTubers and Football Creators the Future? I totally forgot I had this article to read, but I did get the article, and it's linked in the description, so you can check it out. But thank you all, and I will see you. I will be back tomorrow. And by the way, one thing for you people that live in New York and LA, David Cronenberg, one of my favorite directors, his new movie comes out this week in Los Angeles and New York, and I believe it opens wide the next week. It's called The Shrouds, and it stars Vincent Cassel as a thinly veiled David Cronenberg. And if you don't know anything about it, it's literally about a guy who creates a new way to bury people, where they wear this shroud, and you can watch your loved ones decompose on video screens below where they're buried. Now, I don't know how that's going to work out in the plot of this film. I don't know much about it. Diane Kruger is in it, but it's called The Shrouds, and it's Cronenberg. His last movie, Crimes of the Future, wasn't what I hoped it would be. He's still one of my favorite directors. So go check out The Shrouds and report back. And I will have an interview on John Campion's channel with the costume designer of The Shrouds on Friday. So check that out. I mean, we need help. Anybody who wants to listen to Designing Hollywood, please listen. We work really hard on those, and they don't have a lot of views, but I love doing them anyway. And on that note, I bid you all, live long and prosper.